Welcome everybody to episode 77 of Dork Tunes. Thanks for sticking with us and welcome this week. Obviously I'm Evil Noob, or Noob, whichever. This week we've got somebody slightly different. Again, I like kind of going off piece every so often, as we have done the last few months. And I think I'll get them to introduce themselves.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Pete. My name is Matt Ombler, and I'm a freelance journalist specialising in video game music and the intersection of games and music.
Thank you very much for being part of the show, Matt. It's a real honour to have you on. So tell me, obviously you're not a composer. How did you get to where you are now? What started this little spark?
I'd say, so it started with writing. I mean, obviously, I think like anyone who gets into this, I've always been into video games. I've been playing games since I was literally like 4 years old. That came from my uncle having a Sega Mega Drive. So I played Sonic for the first time, then picked up a Nintendo 64, and then the rest is history, basically. But when I was about 16 or 17, I had a huge collection, and I remember my mum used to buy me whenever she'd go to the shop, she'd always buy like a copy of like official Nintendo magazine. I think it was Nintendo official magazine back in the day, and pretty much whatever else you could find on the bookshelf, like gaming wise, at like WH Smith and stuff, because back then you had all the official magazines, didn't you? And then you just had like reels of like all of these unofficial magazines. I've still got quite a lot now, to be honest. So when I was like coming out of sixth form, I was like, right, I quite like the idea of writing about games, because I did really well in English when I was at school. Obviously I like games, so I was like, you know what, it'd be cool to find a way to combine the two. Didn't know obviously how to go about that, because you can't turn around to your English teacher and be like, oh, how do I write about video games? So basically sent a load of letters off to various editors at the gaming magazines. I think official Xbox magazine came back to me at the time, and basically said that the way we can give you some advice, which is just basically email a bunch of people, start building a portfolio, because obviously I didn't have a portfolio at that time because I was like 16 and 17. So while I was at university, basically started writing for a bunch of, I guess, like hobbyist websites kind of thing, not getting paid, but just kind of like getting review codes and stuff now and again. And then ended up joining a band, because I've always been into music. I've been playing music since I was like 13, 14. I'm a drummer. So yeah, the band did quite well. We ended up touring around the UK and Europe. That was in a metal band called Demoralizer. So I didn't do much with my writing while I was in the band. And then the band split up. And then I guess about 5 years ago, maybe or so, I was like, right, I want to start taking my writing more seriously. I want to actually kind of get into this properly. Started pitching just a load of general video game ideas, and then I was like, you know what, there's tons and tons of people writing about just video games, like who have been doing it for a lot longer than me and are probably a lot better at it than me. I need a niche. So I was like, right, you know what, I'm gonna make video game music my niche, because I've always loved video game music. I had a load of CDs and stuff at that point. I think the CD that got me into game music, back in the day, I used to get a lot of free CDs with the gaming magazines, and I remember getting it was called Super Smashing Live, I think, and it's a bunch of orchestrated music from Super Smash Bros. Melee, performed by the Tokyo Philharmonic, I think. And it's still to this day, it's one of my favorite albums, because the arrangements on that CD are just ridiculous. Started sending pitches out. I'd say I probably got my first proper piece in Vice, which was about basically what I write about now. It was how video games influenced my taste in music, because I've always kind of said, if it weren't for games like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and Wipeout, FIFA and things like that, like helping me discover all of these like metal bands, punk bands, alternative bands, like I wouldn't have probably got into a band in the first place. And then that's just been it from there, really. Just trying to just spread the word about video game music, to be honest. And because I've always seen it as, I remember back in the day with the video game magazines, you used to have a little separate bit for music, and that always used to get a shout out. But I'd say a lot of the reviews and stuff, or a lot of like gaming write-ups that I see, there's not game music. I think you'll probably agree with me on this. It's quite often overlooked. So I was like, right, I want to do something about that, because there's so many amazing composers out there. Not even composers, like sound designers, audio directors, all of these people working in the field who are doing really cool stuff. And people need to shout about it for people to hear about it. So
I get it. I completely get you. Yeah, I get you on the whole thing. And that is something that I kind of brought up recently with Edge magazine. I sent a letter into them a few months ago now, and it was published. Because how many times over the years that you read a review and it's like 3, 4, 5, 6 pages long, maybe music gets mentioned in like a sentence or not at all, and it just boggles my mind, because it's one of the things they're going to hear the most. People are going to recognize, they hear the soundtrack, they hear the main theme, and they go, I know what game that is. It just boggles my mind why the kind of attention isn't there. And this is something that I've said for years and years and years. You're right, as in, you see all the magazines previously, they used to have that separate section for music. I just, even now, it's 2022 now, and there's still a smidge written on a 4-page review about the music, when it's one of the biggest things in the game, probably one of the most costly things. I've known a lot of people who've recorded in like Air Studios, and we've got a friend who's recording in Abbey Road on Monday, and that's obviously not going to be cheap. So why are we not spending that time kind of having those conversations and kind of bringing those people up? Absolutely. I agree with you as well. We need to be talking about those people that people don't really kind of realize that are there and doing their thing to get what you hear.
Yeah, because I think it's a mix. What I will say is there's definitely, when I was pitching stuff like 4 or 5 years ago, I used to get so many replies. But I often didn't just get replies, I'd get ignored, which is basically like the nature of being a freelance writer. You send off 20 emails and you'll be lucky to get a reply back from one editor saying no thanks. But back then I got a lot of feedback from editors who were kind enough to reply, basically saying, sorry, there's not much interest in this kind of stuff. People are interested in reading about game music. But I'd say in the past 2 years, past 2 or 3 years maybe, I'm starting to see a lot more articles on game music or sound design and stuff outside of the kind of like games industry or games. I've forgotten what Games Sutra rebranded to, but do you know what I mean? In terms of like outside of the specialist like audio deep dives by experts, you kind of get in the wider video game music article. I am seeing more of those now. I will say Edge is actually, I think, one outlet that's fantastic when it comes to this stuff, because rhythm games have never, like, other than Guitar Hero and Rock Band and like the dance machines, like I have not spent the time learning about these kind of like new era of rhythm games, the ones that have kind of like platform mechanics for it and stuff where you can move around. And I learned about all of those games through Edge magazine, because they seem to be really spotlighting stuff like this at the moment. So I'd say shout out to those guys in particular for doing stuff like that. But I think there is a general need for more publications to kind of shout about music. But to that point, they can only do that if these game companies and studios actually have their PRs pushing out stories and interview opportunities. I think if we look at Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I'm sure you've seen all of like, I think it's is it Mitsuda who's doing the soundtrack for that? I think they put out a Twitter video, I think the other day, the Nintendo social account, basically saying, I think they've handmade all of the instruments, I think, in the game, haven't they?
Oh
To play
yes,
with
yes,
it.
I've seen that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
That is
and stuff like that
insane.
is, yeah, exactly, it is, and like stuff like that is absolutely amazing.
And the
But I'm
detail on them
also
is
kind of
incredible as well.
exactly. But then I'm kind of going, why are Nintendo? Well, to be fair, Nintendo like historically really bad at this, and I don't mind slagging them off either because they are really bad at pushing
Nintendo.
music. But yeah, but there's obviously like a really cool story there, like
Yeah.
beyond just what they've put out on social media, and it's like, why aren't your PR team pitching interviews with? I'd love to speak to them. I'd love to learn more about the music in that game.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I do get more of that now. I am getting more emails in my inbox kind of going, do you want to interview this artist or this composer about X, Y, Z? And so that's good. We're getting there, but I
Yeah,
still
definitely.
think bigger companies need to do more.
I mean, one of the things I'd love to see is something like, when I've been lucky enough to be at a recording of Ori and the Will o' the Wisps, and it was in Air Studios, and it was one of the most incredible days of my life. You've never seen anything like it. I know me and lots of other people, like we're not talking tens, we're talking hundreds, and would love to see kind of more stuff. There's always documentaries about people making the game, but there's never anything about making the soundtrack. People would lap that up left, right, and center. You got to look at it at the moment. Over the last kind of 10 years, the sale of and the release of, video game music on vinyl has gone, it's gone exponentially up and up and up. There are companies that have built themselves on video game music releases, like Data Discs, I Am 8-Bit, you name it, they're out there, and Black Screen Records, and they're all absolutely amazing at what they do, and it's not something they take on very lightly when they're choosing which games to release. Yeah. But those things are lapped up left, right, and center. I was speaking to a friend recently about one of my favorite soundtracks and games of the last kind of gen. And
which soundtrack?
Everybody's Gone to the Rapture.
Yeah.
It was my favorite soundtrack for 6 years running on Spotify. Every Christmas. But like that's had to be repressed 6-7 times now.
Yeah.
That just shows you the kind of veracity and desire that people have for video game music, and it just boggles my mind even now. And I know that you're saying that you're getting a lot more emails about interviews with particular composers or whatever, but why are we not seeing this out in the general kind of, gaming kind of public?
I think it comes back to, I actually think the companies themselves are really bad.
They don't
when
know
I say
what they're doing in a sense.
When I say the companies themselves, I mean the big like major studios, because a lot of the pitches that I get that are interview requests come from PR agencies that are obviously contracted by game companies, but a lot of the time they'll also, and I know this because I used to work in PR, they'll be the ones coming up with ideas who, like how we're saying now, why aren't people doing this? You've got PR teams at agencies going, oh, well, we're working on this game, but why don't we put some interview opportunities out with the soundtrack? Because actually the soundtrack is really good. And so you do have that, but you still, like, honestly, I just think if I was still in PR and I worked at Nintendo, I'd just be going like boom, 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 sending off, because there's so many things out. It like you were saying, it is mad in terms of like you look at the vinyl sale boom. To your point, I think there was something like 3 or 4 specialist video game music labels in 2015, and I think now in total count there's 39, and that's not even including the distributors, like which is absolutely mad. Like you were saying, there's things like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture that are getting repressed constantly, but you've even got smaller soundtracks. I was talking to I've forgotten his name, owner of Black Screen Records recently anyway, and he was telling me one of their most popular records is Valhalla, which is obviously just like, it's not a small indie game, but it's not this big well-known game. So I think the fact that you've got records like that selling out and getting repressed, it's like, you're right, there's so much potential, there's so many people who would be interested. Like you've been to concerts before. Look at all of the full
Yeah.
seats there. Like sell-out concerts, music on Spotify, racking up plays in the millions. Like the demand is there, but I don't think it's been served to the extent that it could be served by the companies who could do more.
No, I completely agree. You know, and why is it always? I'm assuming you're going to find this as well. But when they do kind of gigs and concerts and stuff, it's always in London or it's always in Manchester. It's never in anywhere else. You know, in all my years, 18. What? No, sorry, I'm in Leeds nearly 20 years now. I've been to one gig, which was video game music related. That's it.
Yeah.
And Leeds has so much in it. We've got like the arena, we've got the O2 arena, we've got the First Direct arena, you know, which hold a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing.
We're lucky, I guess, because we're still in the middle, aren't we? You're Leeds, I'm Hull.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a middle ground. But I always kind of think, what about the people in Newcastle or like Scotland, like when there's like a big like Final Fantasy tour happening, and it's only in London, like you were saying, because like you probably know, it's a ball ache getting down to London for me personally. So I'm going to the proms, the BBC Gaming prom. To be fair, I'm going down a day early because I don't get to go to London that often, but we've got tickets for the train down there. Then we've got accommodation because by the time where we live, by the time the concert finishes, there's no realistic way of us getting back to King's Cross and then getting back home. So you need to pay for a hotel to stay over the night. And I feel like it just prices people out. I'm thankful. Thomas Bocker's bringing the Final Symphony tour to Birmingham next year, which should be good. But you're right, there needs to be more things happening in major cities because Leeds is a massive city. Manchester, I don't know why nothing happens in Manchester because Manchester's huge and it's got excellent transport links.
Yeah. Honestly, it beggars belief, but hey ho, what do we know? Actually, you've just touched on something I'd really quite be interested in hearing about this from you. Is over the last 10 years, can you give me 2 or 3 soundtracks that absolutely still blow your mind, blow your socks off?
In terms of ones which have been released in the past 10 years?
Yeah, that you really like.
Cool. The Doom 2016 soundtrack.
Okay.
Because as someone who played in a metal band, I like heavy music, and I feel like there's never really been a good metal soundtrack. You kind of get a lot of you get that metal sound that kind of comes out of Platinum games as an example, like Metal Gear Rising, but it's a bit like cheesy new metal, which I'm not really into, whereas Doom 2016 was straight up like Meshuggah, just heavy. Mick Gordon as well. He's not just a good producer. Sorry, he's not just a good composer. He's a ridiculous producer.
Yeah.
Like the way he makes his music sound. So I'd say Doom 2016. I really liked the Final Fantasy 15 soundtrack.
Okay.
Really liked that because I wasn't a fan of Final Fantasy. I wasn't a fan of the music in 12, and I wasn't a fan of the music in 13, and I've not played 14. Although people say a lot of excellent things about the music, I've not really checked it out. So the 15 soundtrack came out, and I was like, this reminds me of Uematsu's earlier stuff. Shimamura did a ridiculously good job on that.
Yeah.
And then what else? God, there's so many things. I'm trying to think how long 10 years ago was. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not.
I know. I get you.
Recently I've been so I'm going more left field with my choices here because there's obviously loads of amazing orchestral soundtracks, but I'm trying to think of stuff that stood out because it was a bit different. Machine Girls soundtrack for Neon White is just ridiculous because that reminds me of the kind of like PS1 games I grew up playing with those like 90s rave and dance soundtracks and stuff like that. So I think definitely, yeah. So Neon White, Doom 2016, and Final Fantasy 15. And I'm sure after this call, when I think about that question again, I'm going to kick myself and go, "Why the fuck did I mention it?" What about you?
I think some of my obviously everyone's gone to the Rapture. It's one of my favorite of all time. I love the game. I love the soundtrack. You know, Jess sent me the soundtrack about a month before it came out. and there was two pieces of music on it, and that made me cry. And she was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then I played the game, and the two pieces of music are two places in the game that made me cry. It's like just because of what happened in it. The caravan park. Hello. Um, Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
good.
Amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. Others like kind of So Let Us Melt, Journey. There's so, as you said, there's so many. It's
Journey, I forgot
hard.
about.
Oh,
That's a good
one of
shout.
my major ones has to be a really not very well known one. That Dragon Cancer.
Okay.
A uh, guy called John, and he is. I don't know whether have you heard of the game?
No. I
It's
think, mate, tell me about it, and then if you're going to talk about certain themes, I think I might, because it sounds like
it's
something I've read about
basically
in terms of.
this. It's basically the story of a family with a young son called Joel, and Joel is like maybe 1, 2. Not he's literally only a
Yeah.
baby, and he's got cancer, and
Yes,
it's the story of it.
I've heard about this. Yeah.
Yeah, and that soundtrack is just phenomenal. There's a piece on there called "Awake, Oh Awake, My Joel,"
Yeah.
and when I hear it, even when I'm talking about it, I get quite emotional because it is so beautiful. The way he's done it is that you can hear every single note. You
Yeah.
can hear every single kind of emotion that they're going through. You can hear love, you can hear fear, everything. And because the piece allows you to do that, and it is incredible. So I would always suggest headphones, that up loud. It's like 2.5 minutes long. It will blow your mind. So that's my recommendation.
I love what you said there, because I think you basically just sold this is why people get so passionate about video game music, because what you described there in terms of
Yeah.
just trying to explain the bits of music that hit you in a certain way, because I'm going to guess they're accompanied by a really powerfully like emotional like scene.
Mm-hmm.
And talking, you do get like a little bit choked up. I'm
Yeah.
exactly the same when I try and tell people about Life is Strange, because there was so many moments in the first Life
Mm-hmm.
is Strange game where me and my girlfriend played through that together. And I think that's what made it even better, because the choices you have to make in that game, it's like a lot of the times you're a piece of shit no matter what choice you make. Do you know what I mean? Like someone's going to get hurt. So when I try and tell people about that game or a specific piece of music that played at a certain time, I can feel
Yeah.
myself kind of
I
getting
think
that like.
I'm quite lucky slash unlucky in a way where I'm quite emotional when it comes to music.
Yeah.
Joe from Flight, he's exactly the same. So we might send each other a piece of music and be like, just,
Yeah.
you get really quite emotional.
Yeah.
I remember I interviewed John Hillman, who did that Dragon Cancer, and that's a story and a half. Basically, I had to do it twice because the first time I did it, I was speaking to him. I don't have kids. I'm never going to have kids. It's not my thing, and that's fine. But it got me even emotional speaking to him through the conversation, and I could hear it in my own voice, and feel it,
Yeah.
But then the iMac was really old, and we wiped it, and it was wiped with the original interview on it. So I had to email him again and say, look, I'm really sorry, but do you mind if we redo this? And he was like,
I've
do you know
been
what?
there.
It's cool.
Feel your
It
pain.
happens. That's exactly what he said. He said, I've been there. These things happen. So we just did it again, and it was fine. Much better. But yeah, John Hillman, check it out. It's fantastic.
I will do. I'll check that out. On that note of emotional soundtracks, because so I've never played any of the Ori games, but
Oh,
I
really?
never played them. I need to, because they're on Game Pass and I finally got an Xbox now. That's why I never played them. I never had an Xbox. They're also on Switch as well, so I need to decide what. But anyway, I heard the music in both of those games before. Well, like I said, I've never played them, so I've heard the music. I saw it in concert at the Game Music Festival, and even something about the music in those games. I think Kirk is such a ridiculous composer because he draws so much emotion out of you, as a listener, there's a certain refrain in the first story game where it goes da, 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 and for some reason that bit gets me every single time. And then there's also oh god, I've forgotten the name of the game. Rihanna Pratchett wrote it, and it's scored by, you know which game I mean, don't you?
Yes.
About the grandma, and that is like you know what's going to happen as you're playing through the game, and you're just kind of going, shit, it's coming, it's come. But the music in that as well is just like,
yeah.
Again, like talking about it gets me a little bit like you can, yeah.
What was I doing the other day? Oh yes, like last Sunday I went to the Blue Dot Festival in Cheshire. I went to see Bjork live.
Yeah.
I've never had this before, and this was amazing. Where I stood, and she sang like a couple of, you know, her more famous ones. I think she did Yoga at one point, and literally every single hair from the top of my head all the way down, back up again, I just went up, and I got goosebumps all over. Even thinking about it now is doing the same thing. It was just phenomenal. She's immensely insane, but in such a creative way. I mean, I didn't realize how tiny she was. She's about 5'3", and she came on stage in this like almost like an inflate, you know, like one of those inflatable jackets that you get.
Yeah.
It was in like that, but it was like a whole like a headdress and a dress that went out like that, and it was like pink and silver stripes.
Yeah.
And like it had teeth around the edge of her face, and it's honestly, and every time that she wasn't singing, she was spinning around the stage like in this little dress, and it was just so magical. I've never seen anything like it before, you know. I mean, and I went to see Kate Bush when she was playing in London. I mean, admittedly I cried for the first whole act, you know. I could barely see. I was crying so hard.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing the music does. And I think I always say to people, you know, you don't need to be a gamer to be into the game music. You know, my partner doesn't game whatsoever, but loves when I sit and put some music on.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely loves it. So it's, you know, maybe one day we'll drag them in. I just wanted to say a huge thank you today for being part of the show. Again, I've got a frog in my throat. It's been a real honor, and it's been really nice to speak to somebody kind of, I think I'm, you know, composers and everybody who comes on the show are always on their way back, but I think someone, you know, exactly the kind of stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. Like, I was like, it's cool, like what you're doing as well, and like everybody you're speaking to and putting the word out there as well, because it's
11
important
years.
because exactly. It's like way longer, double the amount of time that I've been doing it, man. Like, so hats off to you,
you
man.
know, I don't get anything from this. You know, I have been afforded some experiences, you know, like going to see Ori being recorded live. You know, I've got some signed sheet music that's really special to me. But I do this because I love the music. You know, I always remember the first time, the moment that got me when I was a kid, and that was my starting point, and it's just gone, you know, that way since. You know, and I don't think I'd ever not do it because I enjoy it. You know, I enjoy chatting with people like you. I enjoy chatting with composers. You know, I enjoy chatting to everybody around it because we're all so passionate about it. You know,
and it's nice as well because I think I can't speak for the entire gaming industry, but I feel like parts of the game industry get caught up in a lot of bullshit as well. Do you know what I mean? There's always like a hot topic that everybody wants to throw in the 2 cents on, and you can see all these Twitter arguments taking off and people chiming in, and it's like I've never seen that in like the game music community yet.
No.
Everybody is just so nice, and I think that's what
Everybody's
we're both about, kind of like
tight in a way.
Yeah.
We all know each other. We all look after each other. You know, they're just brilliant people. You know, full stop. But thank you ever so much for being part of the show, and I hope you enjoy your barbecue tonight.
Thank you. I will do.